Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. Today's date is August 24, 2021, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at an old article about Richard Wolff, not too old, about 18 years old, and his peculiar views on the USSR. If you like this video, please click like and subscribe, and consider supporting us on Patreon. There's a link to Patreon in the video description. So yesterday on Twitter, somebody that I follow, Proletariat Rising, made this tweet. So apparently Richard Wolff thinks the USSR was state capitalist, but that it was, quote, communist for a brief period when the peasants were running their own farms after land reform. Then Stalin collectivized the farms, thus ending collective control and instituting capitalism. And then the thread goes on, and ultimately they linked to this article. An article from the Campus Chronicle, Volume 18, Issue 7, from the Amherst campus of the University of Massachusetts, where Wolff has taught for a long time. So let's get into this article because there's some strange stuff in here. It's possible that the author of the article got some of this wrong, but there are quotes in here. So, I guess he could have gotten the quotes wrong. Anyway, we've covered Richard Wolff critically on the channel. Many people view him as a gateway drug to socialism. I actually see Wolff as more of an anarchist personally because of his distrust of workers' states, his embrace of micro-level change and focusing on small community socialism like cooperatives. To me, these are very just anarchist traits, and yet he's constantly out there talking about and seemingly promoting Marxism. I think he's kind of promoting a distorted form of it. That's kind of what the article is about, so let's get into it. Well, it's not what the article's about, but I think it's some evidence of that. So, USSR strayed from communism, say economics professors. New book analyzes Soviet collapse. And just noting the date here, this is October 11, 2002. By the time the Soviet Union was officially dissolved in 1991, asterisk from me commenting, the Soviet Union, there was a Soviet Union-wide public referendum on the question of the dissolution of the USSR. 76% of the population voted against it. They did not want the USSR to be dissolved. It was done anyway. This was a hostile act, and anyway, there's nothing that point is not made often enough. So anytime that you hear somebody saying that, there's a good infographic from Sputnik on the subject. I will link to that in the video description. Anyway, back to the article. By the time the Soviet Union was officially dissolved in 1991, analysts and politicians declared the breakup as the death knell of communism. But a book by two economics professors questions whether a true communist class structure ever existed in the USSR. Sorry if there's background noise. That is just me snoring. Okay. In Class Theory and History, Capitalism and Communism in the USSR, Professors Stephen A. Resnick and Richard D. Wolff, pictured there on the right, both specialists in Marxian, note not Marxist. I always wonder if this is like a little, like wink, tip of the hat there. Oh, we're not Marxist, we're Marxian. Anyway, apply their previously developed class theory to analyze the creation, evolution, and demise of the Soviet Union. Their conclusion, sure to rile critics, I guess I'm one who's been riled, on both the left and the right, is that the 20th century's great ideological schism actually pitted the private capitalism of the West against the, quote, state capitalism of the USSR. Quote, the struggle between communism and capitalism never happened, says Wolff. Quote, the Soviets didn't establish communism. They thought about it, but never did it. Yeah, I guess it's just, they didn't think hard enough or something. Under a true communist system, says Resnick, the workers would control all aspects of production and decide how any surpluses are used. But in the wake of the 1917 revolution, the Bolsheviks imposed a layer of state managers to operate industry in the name of the people. That system, which Resnick and Wolff call state capitalism, actually ceded decisions about the use of profits to government officials. If communism ever existed within the USSR, says Resnick, it was during a brief period following the revolution, when the Bolsheviks redistributed land to the peasants who formed farming collectives. Working at the local level, farmers reached consensus on how their surplus products would be used. But as Wolff notes, those collective decisions didn't fit into the plans of the Soviet leaders and their state capitalism. See, Bad Tanky is trying to, the very odd take here that it was only true communism for like the first few years. Continuing, by the mid-1930s, the Soviet state was having such a hard time getting enough food to feed the workers that Joseph Stalin, quote, decided that the whole revolution was at risk because of the farmers, says Wolff. In response, the Soviet leader abolished the collectives in favor of, quote, state farms run like factories. Resnick and Wolff contend that state capitalism was originally seen by the Bolsheviks as a necessary step in the evolution towards a communist state. But after Lenin's death in 1923, says Wolff, Stalin short-circuited those plans by simply declaring the Soviet Union a communist-socialist state. Interesting terminology. That is not a quote, by the way, just commenting here. That is something that the author wrote. Anyway, according to Wolff, it was a politically expedient solution intended to assuage the masses who had already suffered through the poverty of the Tsarist system and the bloodshed of World War I and the post-revolution civil war that brought U.S., British, French, and Japanese troops onto Russian soil. Faced with the responsibilities of governing and preserving their power, the tankies just want power. It's a power grab. The Soviet leaders found it easier simply to declare the revolution a success. This is such slander. Anyway, quote, they couldn't fight 12 battles at once, says Wolff. They had to choose between their own focus on government and the exigencies of the moment. It was a way to say all the sacrifices have paid off, unquote. Stalin's declaration eased pressure on the Soviets to move towards a fully communistic system, according to Wolff. Quote, he hammered home the point by killing anyone who disagreed, unquote. The decision to embrace state capitalism, say Resnick and Wolff, helped sustain the Soviet state for several decades by providing funding for public services, ranging from healthcare to education to housing. For the once poor nation, says Wolff, the change was, quote, a remarkable phenomenon. By the 1980s, however, the state capitalist industries and farms were incapable of generating enough surplus to sustain industrial capital accumulation, maintain the USSR's superpower status, meet the consumer demands of the population, and pay for the bloated Communist Party apparatus and bureaucracy. Quick comment, no mention of military buildup due to the Cold War, the actual threat of imperialist invasion. Okay. Something had to give, and soon the Soviet leaders began to introduce more elements of private capitalism. Ultimately, that also loosened the political monopoly held by the Communist Party. Soon, the Soviet republics began going their own way. For Resnick and Wolff, the Soviet experiment raises many questions about the nature and future of communism as an economic system. In fact, they devote an entire section of their book to defining communism and socialism, whose philosophical origins go much further back than Karl Marx. As part of their decade-long research, says Resnick, the two economists delved into, quote, the vast literature on utopian, unquote, thought. The utopian literature was long on lofty ideals of working together for the common good, but devoted little attention to how workers should receive the immediate profits of their labor. Similarly, says Resnick, early Christian writings espoused notions of sharing and meeting the needs of all members of society, but the professors found no evidence that communism has been tried on a national scale. Comment there. Those are two very unrelated ideas joined with a conjunction. This article is not the best written, so I will grant a little room for slack. There's a little bit more left. In some of what's being presented here, just chalking it up to a student writer. However, some of the quotes are quotes. Continuing with one of those quotes, now, with the collapse of the USSR, says Wolff, it is time, quote, to drastically rethink the whole idea of communism. What it means to be socialist is up for grabs, he says. Marxism is up for grabs. Comment, and I guess he decided he was going to be the one to grab it and start watering it down with this fucking worker co-op bullshit. Okay, continuing. Quote, we can't concede the end of communism, says Resnick. Communism hasn't been tried on a society-wide basis. It's a boastful notion that communism has been vanquished. In fact, says Resnick, the years ahead may produce a new form of communism, a system based on ownership of private property, stock markets, and political freedom, but allowing workers to decide how the profits of their work are allocated. Quote, if we allow communism to be defined as people getting the profits, it opens up all different possibilities, says Resnick. I think it could work. Quote, there's already a concrete example of communism working in the U.S. What the fuck? Notes Wolff, citing the work practices of some technology workers in, of all places, Silicon Valley. Yeah, noted hotbed of communism, Silicon Valley. Quote, people like you and me in San Jose have been doing it for 35 years, unquote. According to Wolff, disaffected engineers who left large companies to form their own software firms are following the communist model. Comment, and this is the point where everyone should stop listening to Richard Wolff permanently. Here you have a grown-ass man, professor in economics and labor studies, saying stuff like that. So continuing, if communism can be redefined, says Wolff, quote, in the future, when folks get upset with a private system, they may have an alternative. A society that wanted to give people a choice could spend a few years for people to see if the communist enterprise, Jesus, works for them. It could be used as a social experiment. A book signing party with Steve Resnick and Rick Wolff is being held Wednesday, October 16 at Anarchist Books. The book is Class Theory and History, Capitalism and Communism in the USSR, published by Routledge. So that's the end of the article. Do you see now, that was from 2002. Do you see the plan here? Not to get, too deep into the Wolff-Resnick conspiracy, but I mean, there is clear intent here to, Marxism is up for grabs. Let's take it and redefine it in basically this kind of mutualist, worker cooperative centered sort of like anarchism. So, yeah, like basically when software engineers quit companies, then they're already fairly wealthy from, the work that they were doing. And, they come together as petty bourgeois who are going to jointly found, their own software company. And then, they're going to wear sandals around the office and work 4 days a week. That's communism, according to Richard Wolff. There's no national plan. There's no class struggle. There's no confrontation with the bourgeoisie. None of that. Just, set up some software collectives. And that's communism. Do not let people like this redefine communism, because if they do, well, I mean, they're going to be pulling out the rug from under us and taking away, what people think is what is meant by communism. They're not even just going after socialism. They're talking about like Marxism itself, communism itself, and talking about these like, software collectives as communism. Absolutely not. I mean, but this is, this is their clear intent. And that has been my criticism of Wolff, is that he is basically an anarchist promoting this kind of mutualism. By the way, what's the difference to me of mutualism versus like worker cooperatives? You could get a worker cooperative, say, from, let's say that there is a labor struggle in a workplace and the capitalist who owns the place gives up. And then the workers as a whole, like maybe through the union, if it's an independent union or something, buys the business. Okay, well, that's actually the workers kind of, wresting control of the enterprise from the owner. Maybe there's a financing deal worked out that doesn't come out of, a big down payment from the workers, who obviously don't have any capital. They're workers. That to me, those are actual proletarians collectively conquering an enterprise, and you get a worker cooperative out of it. Mutualism to me is more of like a white collar socialism. It's a white collar, more of a petty bourgeois worker cooperative among people who had the capital to found something. And then, they just kind of do this, non-blue collar work within that kind of a setting. I'm oversimplifying a little bit, but to me, that's what mutualism always means, is like definitely people, there's a bar to entry of having a certain amount of money to get in on most of these schemes. I mean, there are like cooperative apartment buildings, for example, in some big cities, but they're extremely exclusive. Like you buy your apartment from the building and it's, the building is shared collectively, but it's all rich people. So, I mean, that doesn't make it fucking communism. You know what I mean? Because you're removing the entire backdrop of class struggle, exploitation, and so forth, like that affects society at a society-wide and even now global level in the imperialist age. So, you know, according to Wolff and Resnick, forget about all that, set up a software collective, and boom, communism. Now, this is leaving aside all of the stuff about the USSR. So basically, according to them, it was communism when they gave people land and like just had people farming on their own land prior to the Soviets really getting solid national planning in place and getting the whole, federation coordinated. And then that became capitalism, according to this guy. I don't even know if such a statement is worthy of more commentary, but this is who you're listening to when you're listening to Richard Wolff. If other things he said haven't made sense, this is why. This is the distorted place that he's coming from. It, for a Marxist-Leninist like me, it makes me hunger for Trotsky just to like not listen to this shit. It's like just several steps down. To Richard Wolff, just call yourself a fucking anarchist for real and just stop polluting Marxism. But here it is. It's like some age-old grudge being worked out that anarchists had against Marxists. Just like, we will bring Marxism down, in all kinds of slander and misdirection and redefining. Anyway, I think you know where I stand on this, so I'm going to leave it there. What do you think? Leave a comment. Otherwise, I'll put a link to the overall Richard Wolff playlist if you want more information on why Richard Wolff is not necessarily the best person to get your Marxism from. He's certainly better than somebody like a Destiny, but again, let's raise the bar here. This channel is about raising the bar. And if we want to fight for actual Marxism, then we need to uphold some kind of standards here. So anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks to the current patrons whose names are on the screen. If you'd like to get your name on the screen, head to patreon.com/socialism for all. You can sign up for as little as $2 a month. All of those donations are very much appreciated. They are both encouraging. They also help materially. So again, thank you to everyone who has made a pledge, including people whose names won't show up till September. Thank you. If donations aren't your thing right now, completely understandable. If you'd like to support the channel otherwise, you can follow us on Twitter at SocialismS4A. You can here on YouTube, like, share, subscribe, and comment. Sharing to wherever you're on social media, especially places like Facebook where we don't have as much reach right now, is very helpful. Sharing to any left groups you see. And usually that's been a good vehicle for promotion. Channel's been growing a lot, thanks in large part to your efforts. So we appreciate that. We're trying to expand the conversation around socialism, have a constructive one where we can actually build something, because at the end of the day, doing this online work is important. We've also got to carry it into our communities. And at some point, capitalism is going to break down enough where we will have a moment and a chance to really do something real. This is about getting prepared for that moment today. So thanks for however you are helping in that struggle against capital online and in your community. And we'll see you in the next video.